Welcome to another episode of Ruff Talk VR, a weekly podcast with in-depth game reviews, exclusive developer interviews, and the latest MetaQuest and virtual reality news. We join our hosts, the father-son team of D. Scruffles and Stratus today, as they spend another episode breaking down and discussing the world of virtual reality.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Ruff Talk VR. Today we're joined with what is usually one of my favorite interviews when we get to talk with our favorite coconuts. We're joined today with two members from the Mighty Coconut team, the studio behind Walkabout Mini Golf.
Not one, but two coconuts.
Yes,
with a bunch, does it not?
Yes, with a new course out now, Mount Olympus. And this is an exciting one because today we are joined with Chase Shields. He handles the art side of things, which is on full display on Mount Olympus. And then we also have Chris Reyman, who is the composer for Walkabout Mini Golf.
It's a special one.
Yes, we have talked.
That's real special.
We have talked so much about
the music side of it.
Yes, and we've even gone into long rants with Lucas about it, about how important it is for the music to be good, but also not.
Come see the softer side of Sear. Yeah, too good.
It can't
be too good.
It can't distract you from.
But it's got to be damn good.
It can't distract you from Chase's side, the art side, how beautiful it is. It has to. You can't notice how good the music is. So we have a lot to talk about with you, Chris, that's for sure. But before we go on a tangent, Chris and Chase, do you mind to both introduce yourselves a little bit better than I was definitely able to, and tell us, who you are and what you each do at Mighty Coconut?
Sure. Go ahead, Chase.
Yeah. Chase Shields. I'm the lead tech artist, at Mighty Coconut. And what that entails is basically anything in the tech art kind of wheelhouse, which kind of straddles the gap between all the programming and tech and then art, just like it sounds. But the fun about that is that we get to touch anything from, the final visual look to the lighting to the cool interactables to you name it. So it's a lot of fun.
And I'm Chris Reyman. I'm the composer in residence at Mighty Coconut, and I do almost all of the music. There's a few incidental things that have been covered in other ways here and there. I do all the music in game, and sometimes that spins off into music for other games, little spin-off things or collaborations that Mighty Coconut does, or something that we might chat about a little bit later. Sometimes it spins off into real-world events.
And I see the baby grand behind you, I'll assume.
Yeah.
For those watching on the
video
side,
version, yeah.
Yes, that's a nice background.
It's always a nice touch.
And since
we have the room to put it, by the way.
That's an important aspect as well. Cannot be understated.
My pianos always went against the wall.
So we have both of you on this. What we'll do is probably for the first half, we'll talk a little bit more with you, Chris, on the music side. Mm-hmm. And then we'll switch over to you, Chase, to talk about the mighty work that you do for Mighty Coconut.
Which is the best way to do this one, because we're two totally opposite spectrums of work being done. So it'd be tough to have someone interject into someone else's work.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the obvious spot to start, Chris, is how did you get started in composing music? Is this something you've done since you were a kid? Was it like music classes as a child?
Well, yeah, I'm from a musical family that, goes back generations. My dad was is a trumpet player, and he was a professor of music at a university. His dad played accordion in a polka band. His father played accordion, a few accordion players. It all goes back to the first guy that came over from Bohemia that had, a crank organ that he was playing for people at taverns and stuff. That's the family lore, at least. So it was something that was in my blood and that made sense for me to do. I was composing music before I knew how to compose, just loved writing stuff on paper and hearing sounds. And so I was doing it a lot at a young age, got college degrees in music. And so I got started working with Lucas because we both went to college together. And so, I was writing a lot of music there while we were both students, and we did a few projects together before Walkabout took off.
Wow. It's pretty much a lifetime of music then. Yeah. So Is piano your main instrument, or I'm going to go on a limb and say you're multi-instrumented?
I play a few instruments, but piano is my main instrument. I mean, that's sort of the way it works when you go to a university. You have to kind of focus on one instrument. Even as a composer, they usually do, and piano is kind of the obvious one. But I've played a few other instruments, which sort of helps in, knowing how to compose for them.
I've noticed more people who play piano, and this is just, I could be totally off field on this, but it's just a personal observation. Most people who play piano can pick up other instruments easier than other instruments trying to pick up piano. It's like there's something to that foundation of learning the rules of piano and how to read music that, and I'm even speaking from my own, when I learned guitar, I was like, oh, this isn't that hard at all compared to what I went through to learn piano.
Maybe it's more of that. I think a lot of people play piano also, and it's piano, it's a difficult instrument to play, but it's not a difficult instrument to sound good playing a few things, because you just play a note and it sounds good. You know what I mean? But, to get degrees in it as a performing instrument, it takes a lot of time. And then usually a lot of those skills transfer over to other instruments.
Nope, makes sense. So I'm curious from a composing standpoint, like at what point are they bringing you in and saying, okay, Chris, this is what we're doing? I mean, are you involved from the first concept of a name or title, or?
That's a good question. I mean, it's shifted over the years, so when I first started writing some music for this game in 2020, which, was, I don't know if you guys know this, but there was a little pandemic that happened around that time. You might have heard something about it.
I have heard.
Yeah. And that's actually when we had our first kid, was around that time too. And so I was sort of in the midst of figuring all that stuff out while working my day gig. I should have mentioned up top, maybe I have a day gig as a professor of music at University of Texas at El Paso. And so that's sort of my home base. And so I was doing that stuff all online, and Lucas said, hey, we got this, well, basically what usually happens is, we work on a project and then there's some time that kind of elapses where we aren't connected as much. And then he calls me up and he's like, hey, you want to work on a project again? I'm like, yeah, man, let's do it. So he had the first, the base game, those courses all mapped out basically. And a lot of it was done. But I wasn't, in VR, I wasn't doing that stuff. He basically just pitched the ideas to me as sort of like one-line concepts. And then I composed those first 6 courses, I guess, and the theme, all within a few months or so. And so that was all kind of like they had the fully formed thing going on. Then we went through a period of time where I was kind of getting out front of things a lot more than I am now, at least. And I was, getting some music done kind of in while they were working throughout designing the courses. And then, Chase, I think, would know much more about how this has played out over the past couple of years. I mean, the studio, the number of people working on the game has just exploded, So now they're working so far ahead, so much further ahead than they were before. And, I don't want to get too much in the weeds with the details, but, like now they want to get things locked down much further ahead. And so I'm kind of feel like I'm scrambling to keep up at this point, because there's only one of me and there's a bunch of other people working. So, for the most part, they have the concept all, done. I'm not really in those conversations. There may be something that I can add or kind of bring to the table, but a lot of times it's sort of like synergy, like things that kind of align. I want to take it a certain direction that maybe isn't working or is sort of different than what they're thinking. And then something shifts in their design that all of a sudden they're like, you know what, that actually works now. And it sort of folds in. So I think it often happens that way.
So it's kind of a basic question, but just to understand the workflow of how this all goes down for yourself as a composer, let's take Mount Olympus as an example. you hear that there's the Mount Olympus course in the works. How long does it take you to, make that soundtrack? Like, take us through that process. Do you play the course with no music? Do you just hear Mount Olympus?
There's no music.
And you start and you instantly start brainstorming. What's that process of designing one of these course soundtracks?
Yeah, it's usually that first thing, like the first conversation I have with Lucas is about, what the course is. And usually it's sometimes it's an email that's, like a quirky sort of, this is what we're thinking for this weird, like, off the wall idea, not Mount Olympus, but something else. Here's this off the wall idea that sounds totally crazy, but we're going to do a course on it. It's pretty standard stuff, right? It's usually something kind of like that where, it's like, I know this is crazy, but it's going to work and we'll do it. And, usually that one line gets me thinking about something just immediately, like with Mount Olympus, I start thinking about, ancient Greece, and then start thinking about that region, start thinking about, the Greek gods, and, maybe something that's sort of like superhero music or something, like trying to find that zone that makes sense for the course. And then as I talk with Lucas, it might be, there may be some reference music that he uses that's in the course or that he sends me, or some other things that he details out. I think with Olympus, I won't give you all the details, but he did this one. He had a previous course music. I think it was Hanging Gardens of Babylon. He had that one in there as a placeholder. And he was like, I know that doesn't fit. That's just what I put there. And then he had, because he's a musician also, he actually detailed out, he was like, I don't have a good reference, but I'm thinking it should be around this tempo and this meter with this sort of feel. And he kind of detailed some things out that made complete sense to me and probably was where I was going anyway. But hearing him say it's like, okay, I can, that's a great starting point for me. And then I sort of take it from there.
I just like the process.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you're able to nail each and every one of these courses and bring like
completely distinct sounds.
So it's like, take any one of the settings. It's like, there's always a hint of like, we'll say mental expectation of kind of like a tone or a sound I would expect to hear based on the environment. And then the rest is just this made up flowing song that's not going to end the whole time I'm playing it. It's pretty, we've given the credit as being just as important as
the gameplay or
the gameplay or the artwork,
or
the
anything.
Environment. It's like,
it's just another piece of the pie.
It has to have you wanting to be there.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be something that has, and it would suck if it was music was the reason you didn't want to be there. So there's a lot more goes into these than I think people would realize.
And I will say it's very collaborative, the first collaboration is between, the art and the music, so a lot of times I start usually I start composing before I listen to references or even look at the course, just to get something happening where I'm not immediately influenced by everything else. Right. But once you start playing a game and I'm playing the courses while they're in process, right? So Mount Olympus, I start playing before there's any playable holes really. And the whole design is all, in process, and there's a lot of things, still in the works, but immediately you jump into that course and you see how grandiose it is and how, like the scale of it. And that just automatically takes me somewhere. Like, this isn't going to be, intimate and quiet and, like that. It's going to be something that sounds huge and really, the music needs to show that scope also in the way that it works sonically. And so, there's collaboration at that level, but then as I'm composing, there's input that comes from other people. First, Lucas and I interface a lot before anyone else hears anything. And so there tends to be a lot of back and forth, and that collaboration really helps us get to something that, as you guys said at the beginning, something that fits and hopefully is good and people want to hear, but is also not in the way. It doesn't overtake everything else. It's in service of the narrative and the visuals and everything else.
I think it was Lucas who had told us when we were really talking about how great the music is, and he was like, you got to keep it at a level though. There is times you'll have to reel them in because it's too good. Like you're, in mid-afternoon, you're thinking these songs that you heard.
I can't imagine how hard that is though. It's like telling a chef, like, don't,
or a race car driver not to speed,
not to go so fast, or
go as fast as you can.
An artist not to make something too beautiful.
Don't make it too good.
Don't make it too good. How do you? So now, I mean, you're a decent amount of courses in on this. If you're working on the original, and there's how many DLCs now, it sounds like you've had quite a bit of experience making music or music soundtracks for Walkabout Mini Golf. How do you balance that? Where you go, this is going to hit my level of what I consider of quality, but I'm also not going to dominate the playing field with it.
It is challenging. I mean, sometimes it's a no-brainer. Sometimes it kind of happens naturally. I mean, there are a few courses that are maybe a little bit more ambient, so things like that kind of come naturally sometimes. But it is pretty common for me to compose something, kind of get a good rough thing going, and in the end, I end up editing out lots of elements or trying to dial things back in different ways. And so, that's, I think, usually works better, to have a bunch of great ideas and take some out than to, start with one sort of thing that maybe works, but you still need a whole bunch more to make it happen. And I think that maybe the only one that didn't happen with is Mount Olympus. Maybe, that one was, like kind of throwing the kitchen sink. Like this one can be a little bit more in your face in terms of the melody and how big it is. But yeah, I mean, just recently some back and forth with some upcoming things. It was kind of like, yeah, that's a little more than what we need, or, something like, Mars Garden, like that one, I was pretty close to the original or the final thing when I first started, but there were lots of other elements that I wanted to get in there that just sounded like, Mars to me. It was just too much. It was just too distracting. And so, that's something that the thing I've had to learn more over the last 4 years is like letting go, like letting go of good ideas that aren't, that don't fit. And that's the collaboration part. And I think that's the thing that makes it special. And, I want to get to a point where I can nail it the first time. It's sort of like, you guys gave a lot of great examples, but it's like someone that's, really smart and might be top in their class. It's like, yeah, but could you be second best? Like, could you like aim for, can you be smart enough to know like what is the, like the top thing and then dial it back? Like that's, that to me is like, takes a lot of care and, a lot of intelligence that I'm, developing as I'm working on all these courses.
Well, and the professionalism to not be so attached to your art that you can't be willing to let go or see somebody else's vision. That's an area that people, I don't care what the line of work, people struggle in that. It can seem like a personal attack,
especially with creative pursuits, which because they're coming from your brain, like they mean so much to you. They're your children, you know? So it's like if you have to cut a part out, but that part might be the whole thing to you, it's like that can't go. There's no point in the whole thing if that's not there.
It's a grieving process when you go through it, because that's something that I joke with Lucas about all the time. It's like when I get a feedback, message from him on something I'm working on, I usually, my process for that, if it's, if it has some things that are hard to hear, I have a whole process of like, you read it, like you close the computer, you walk away, you digest it, come back, read it again. Oftentimes, like you misread something because you're so attached that you immediately take it personally. But, I've had that experience lots where I've several courses I've written something, I'm like, nailed it. This is awesome. And then like get the feedback. I'm just like, none of it works. And I'm like, okay, so, like, or something that I'm like, this is it. Like, this is the next greatest thing that anyone's ever written. And, like this comes from my heart or whatever. And then like it doesn't work and you feel defeated with it. But, they're all great ideas. And, it's, I think, amazing that there's been so many courses that that haven't just repeated themes, themes in terms of, the whole design, the course itself, the art, the music, like we're not just rehashing the same thing and recycling things. And, to do that and still keep coming up with ideas and everyone's coming up with more ideas than what are ending up in the course. And I think that's kind of an amazing thing. I think Chase knows what I'm talking about. It's like we got ideas to burn, man. Like, let's just keep going.
Well, and while the creative process can sometimes be brutal, Chris, I got to say, every single Walkabout course, we are so complimentary of the music. So the end product always nails it. But does this mean that somewhere there's a vault of cut versions, alternate takes to some of the courses?
Some remixes?
Oh yeah. I mean, you would, and some of the stuff has appeared in other ways. Some things are sort of just like, unfinished things that I, edited stuff out and, finally let go of that whatever weird instrument that I was determined to use on this one course because I thought it was cool. And finally, after like the third version that, or third time that Lucas is like, can we just get rid of that thing? Like he's not being polite anymore. Take that thing out. Like all that stuff is somewhere, but very rough and unfinished. But I got to say, there's a course that one of the base game courses that we had a completely different track for almost until it was released. And, almost the 11th hour, someone else on the team kind of pointed out it didn't fit at all. And when, I did the final course, it ended up being one of people's favorites, Seagull Stacks. That one had a completely different soundtrack that had nothing related to what the version is now. And that was one of the things that near the beginning, it was like, yeah, this doesn't really feel like it fits the game or the course. And I think that I think it might have been Henning that pointed that out. But, that kind of thing, that sort of larger group collaborative process, I think has helped all the music kind of come together and be what it is. So yeah, there's stuff floating around there or stuff hidden away on my machines that probably will never see the light of day.
Oh, I hope one day it does. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan and they drop like the bootlegs, like 60 years later, we could have the Walkabout bootlegs.
No, I'll have something on my computer that says, do not release these.
Burn after listening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Always a hard question to ask anyone that creates
I
because
know what you're going to ask.
They're all your babies. Yep. Do you have of all of the courses, do you have a favorite for soundtrack wise? I mean,
well, I'll mention a few. Okay. For different reasons. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to plug a few things too. So, we have coming out pretty soon here. We have our third, volume of the soundtrack coming out in a week or two. And one of my favorites that I created for this upcoming soundtrack is Mars Gardens. I really love how that one turned out. And that was one of the tracks that I created that I immediately thought like, this could be like one of like an entire album, like a whole world of music within this, that I was really proud of the way that worked. For different reasons, there are other courses that the music is more could stand alone a little bit more, and this brings me to another thing I want to plug. There's an event coming up on March 14th in Austin. We're actually I got commissioned to write some music for a video game event there that they're doing at their local station KMFA. Power Up, the art of video game music. It's going to be a cool event that involves a bunch of other people, but Walkabout's going to be there. We're going to be playing. There's going to be 5 pieces that I orchestrated for this chamber orchestra there called Density 512. Super cool group that does a lot of really innovative projects. And I chose pieces specifically that I thought would fit this ensemble and that kind of worked well in a live setting. And that would be Quixote Valley, Ice Lair. I did a version of that one. Seagull Stacks. There's one that I'm forgetting right now off the top of my head. Atlantis, that's another one. And Mount Olympus, I did a version of that. It's going to be, the concert's going to be right around the time that course is released. So I think it'd be kind of cool to put those all there. So those are some of my favorites that I've used in different ways, did alternate versions of, kind of presented to students and in conferences that I go to, because I think they showcase the art form in a way, because they're more melodic, they're more, acoustic in a way. So those are some of my other favorite courses that I've loved working on.
And how many, I want to ask a question about this orchestra. How many pieces are it going to be?
It's a chamber. It's like a small chamber orchestra. So I think they have like 17 people. So it's kind of like it's like an orchestra, but it's almost just like one of each of the instruments is kind of the way you would think about it. And they're performing a lot of music. It's going to be a big event. It'll be cool. So I'm really looking forward to that. Also because I get to travel to Austin and hang out with the Coconuts there. So.
And that third album that you had referenced that's coming out, that dropped alongside Mount Olympus as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yeah.
That's going to be a must listen for me. I'll put it on my rotation. To be honest with you,
I'd love to hear the thing with a full orchestra.
I think that there's no VR game soundtrack, maybe except besides I Expect You to Die, that deserves to be on vinyl.
Underdogs.
More, Underdogs,
Underdogs.
than the Walkabout Mini Golf soundtracks. I would love to have these, like I said, as vinyl records. It would be the best.
For vinyl would be the way to go.
Like you even brought it, like you have Thanksgiving at your house or Christmas, you have a family event, you put on a Walkabout record in the background. It's like the perfect background ambient for
You'll
a family
enjoy
event.
it, but you won't find it too obtrusive.
It's literally what it's designed for.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
That's what I wanted it for.
Yeah. So just
Truth be
planting some
told.
seeds here as well.
Oh, Walkabout vinyl is, dude, to any studio. It's like vinyl's the way to go.
Mhm.
Vinyl outsold CDs last year.
So last question for me, and I'll pass it to you if you have any others for him. It's kind of a silly question, but did you ever think you would be making music for video games, or have you always been a gamer and this has kind of like been a little dream of yours as well?
It was not necessarily something on my, my list of things I was aiming for. When I first started working with Lucas, we did a couple film projects, and that was something that was a little bit more, where I was aiming, in some of the work that I was doing. And Walkabout, is very cinematic in the way that the music works. And so it really is right along that vibe. So it's not something that I was, going after, but the way that it's worked, especially with the way that Walkabout works, I mean, the community, the fans, like the fact that it's ongoing, so I'm working on stuff that you guys will, hear in half a year or a year or something. And I'm getting messages from people about music that I composed 4 years ago, and it's sort of influencing the way that I'm going about the next things I'm working on. Or it's an amazing thing that I haven't experienced with the film projects or any of my other work that I've done. Any of the other albums I put out or projects I've worked on over the years hasn't had this sort of feedback loop and just the scope, the number of fans and how international it is. It's been amazing to do. I don't think I could have predicted that it would have become as big as it is.
Great stuff, Chris. You're an essential part of the Walkabout Mini Golf
critical
experience.
I'm glad to see, and I think the sounds and music in video games is starting to finally get
The recognition it deserves.
the better I think there's always been some that have, and I mean there's certainly awards that'll recognize it, but as a whole, it's like the importance of that, knowing like, hey, you take that, play the game on mute. It's not going to be that same vibe. I don't care what the game. Watch a movie on mute. It's not scary anymore. You know, sound means a lot. And I would also argue that although movies might have been the thing, but it's like you're essentially able to do a soundtrack a month. You know, that's a whole brand new movie. Could be totally different genre instead of being like, oh, I'm doing 3 movies for the studio and it's all the same shit, you know, same theme song.
That is a cool part. I mean, I think that's one of the cooler things about Walkabout that's different than other game companies also, like other games, right? I mean, it's like I'm immersed in Mount Olympus, this vibe, and like doing research on ancient Greece and Macedonia and Albania and like finding instruments and drums, and like I do that for, a couple months and then move on to something completely different. Then I'm in outer space, then I'm underwater, it's like it's super cool.
And I'll assume all your students know what you're doing here.
Oh yeah. They know. I mean, we don't have a ton of, I don't have a lot of students that are like super gamers or anything, but a lot of people are interested in the industry. And, my focus of my students is on the creative process. And so, the way that I work with this studio and on this game is an essential part of how I teach my students, that same sort of flow, being able to come up with ideas quickly and not waiting for inspiration, but just being able to work. So yeah, they know all about it because I bring it into my teaching all the time.
All right. Last one, I promise. Has this experience of working at Mighty Coconut for Walkabout Mini Golf, do you feel it's made you a better musician?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the ability to compose, I'll just say commercially, like in a way that like I'm composing for something, is, I think it's a really, it's a challenge to do. And I think it's a skill, I mean, a lot of people create music, just what they want to hear and make something. And that's amazing. And a lot of that stuff sounds great, but to be able to, strike that balance between what I want to do and what someone else wants to hear. That's something that I brought into a lot of my other work, as a performer. I'm an improvising jazz musician, and so that's something else I can bring in, that it kind of helps balance, just doing all the crazy stuff I want to do with maybe thinking about the audience and what they want to hear, and like chilling out a little bit and trying to be more, I was going to say mature. I don't know if I'm mature, but, trying to be a little bit more careful about the choices you make so that you can, appeal to a wider audience.
Sometimes I like the word experienced instead of mature. I don't know if I'm mature. I might have experience. It'll be a little childish.
Well, my last question was going to be like, what's your favorite genre of personal music to play? But I'm going to take a stab and say jazz would be your go-to preference of just noodling on the piano. Or
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's sort of the world I live in is jazz. And I think I'm saying that I'm old, but the older I get, the sort of like more further back I go in the stuff I'm listening to, and so I'm kind of getting back into like 50s sort of era jazz and kind of checking that stuff out a little more deeply these days.
Well, for those who don't know, Austin has a huge music scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great music city to visit.
Place is bussin', dude.
Yeah, Austin's the place to be. I was lucky enough to visit the studio last year. Just happened to be vacationing in Austin, actually last February. Great vibes at that studio, that's for sure.
I hear good things.
So thank you for all the insight into
Thanks so much.
The audio. This has been a much requested one from us for
much
sure.
Needed.
Yeah.
Needed this in my life.
Yeah. Like I said, you're a huge part in the Walkabout experience for sure.
Thanks, you guys. I mean, I'm trying not to blush too much with all the compliments. So thanks so much. And I'd love to come back sometime.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Awesome.
Your work definitely speaks for itself, sir.
And I think we'll be hearing plenty more of it in the future.
Seems like quite frequently.
And now going to our second half of the interview, focusing on tech artist Chase over here, which right off the top, before we get into things, I have to give you a huge props on your video setup, Chase. I mean, I think you're the first guest we've ever had from a development team that have the full mic set up as well too. Is this not your first podcast interview?
No, it's funny. In my for fun, I also run a Cybertruck podcast as well, because last year I had a day one reservation. So I had a Cybertruck for a good 8 months. So we're renting it on Turo and made it a business, but we don't have it anymore. But I still run the podcast just for fun, just to talk EVs and all that fun stuff. So yeah, definitely I got this. And I also was kind of doing some recordings for some online mentoring and tutoring stuff. So I'm all right, I got to upgrade my mic game. So
yeah,
nice. And
when you see the nice chair, the nice mic, and the headphones, you're good.
Since we're recording, Chris, you want to plug your podcast name? Since we got a fellow podcaster here, I feel like it's appropriate.
Yeah, it's called Keep on Cybertrucking.
That's a great name.
Is that trucking or IN?
Trucking.
But the apostrophe.
Yeah, the most ironic thing about it was three Cybertruck owners, and that's how we started it. But now all of us have since sold our Cybertrucks.
Oh,
so it's funny because it's more it's honest ownership of hey, this is our experience, and kind of following the phenomenon and all the crazy stuff in the news, and so
shows you how fun podcasting is to do.
The fact that all three no longer have it,
I know.
I would suggest listening to this podcast and find out why.
Right?
Tune in and find out why.
What may or may not have happened.
So
let's go.
So Chase, you are a tech artist for Mighty Coconut.
Yep.
Educate me if you don't mind, because we had Edward on before, and he took us through a whole crash course on triangles and such for animation and
we've had a few of the artists on.
What exactly is tech artist versus other areas of artwork for gaming?
Yeah, so essentially I'll take what Edward and all the great modelers have been doing and try to make that actually function into the game itself. So a good example of that is actually Mount Olympus was a really big feat when it comes to just the modeling. It's it started as 1.3 million tries. That's a lot, and that's the most we've ever done. And at the end, it was actually down to 1.2 million, which is still way over than we've ever done. But getting all of those triangles to actually render on the Quest 2 as a bare minimum is not easy. So a lot of not just tech art doesn't only just do performance, but that's a big kind of umbrella that we kind of keep in mind of this has to perform on the Quest in a way that is not going to turn away players because they're getting really low frame rates and start to feel sick or nauseous. But yeah, performance is a big side of it, but also we get to try to make the visuals sing as much as possible. So we'll work with lighting and shading, all the effects, all of the interactable effects. So in Vegas, for instance, there's a lot of Elvis, there's a lot of interactable guitar strings and the microphone, all that kind of stuff falls under the tech art umbrella as well. So we get to see a really big chunk of the production process, but mostly we are right at the tail end. So gameplay is already pretty solid. We take the visuals and make it work, make it sing.
So an incredibly important position.
I wouldn't have guessed that was the scope of.
Yep, that's why I had to ask right off the start.
I was trying to think. I'm well, there's environmental artists.
Yeah. So what does a tech artist do?
So what the hell is a tech?
Which it does make
really
sense according to the name tech art. That would make sense. That and
technically an artist.
An extremely important position, because you can have as grand of a vision as you want for visuals, but if it doesn't run on a freaking Quest 2, which I'm sure is an extremely tough benchmark to hit each and every course. And then it means nothing. The course has to run, like you said, with good frame rate. People can't get nauseous. So, damn, that must be a challenge, especially for when you bring up Olympus. You go in there that first time, you see Mount Olympus. It's freaking huge.
Well, the first thing we do is we always go to that big view. I want to see the whole thing in its scope. I want to see what this really looks like.
And it's a beautiful
it's nice.
course.
They're all nice, though. So I can't say one's even better than the other anymore.
So before we get too much into it, I always like to start with people's background, how they became the person they are today. So, how did you get started in art side of things? Is it something you went to school with?
Yeah. So, since I was a kid, I was always had an interest in animation and film. Like initially, I actually wanted to work for Pixar because that's the movies that I was really infatuated with. Ironically, when I met my wife, she had this kind of the same goals and aspirations that I eventually met her in animation art school. So basically, classically trained as an animator, and then went into commercial animation and film, and kind of I was seeing kind of the writing of the wall, like where the industry was starting to turn. So I'm like, okay, let's see what else I could do. And I've always like played video games as well. So like I actually did make a transition into games, and now I've been in games doing anything from animation to now tech art. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, I've mostly been in games now for the majority of my career. At a certain point, it did teeter over top what I did in film. But I like it because we still get to tell stories in a more interactive way. That's in a sense, it's more intimate than you can get even from a 2D film. So this is not only 2D, but it's VR. So we're putting people in those experiences, and then we're building this world and telling a story through world building, which is so fun. And one thing that I also do is I also hide a lot of the little secrets. So like I'm in charge of the mini skulls that you find at the top of the levels. That's this guy.
Do you also hide the dead workers?
I don't hide the dead bodies. That's mostly Edward. Ryan is in charge of the bananas. So
I love the amount of Easter eggs that exist that I still say there's more that people have no clue that are even there.
100%.
Oh, that's exciting.
So I'll give you a hint. Go to Zazura Hard. There's one that still hasn't shown up on the internet.
I cannot wait. If you guys can track player counts, I'd love to see all of a sudden you see like, why is so many people playing Zazura Hard?
Getting Zazura.
Especially hard mode,
Yeah.
They're everyone hunting like, what could this Easter egg even be?
But it was too easy when we gave so if you remember the Fox Hunt and Zazura Hard has like a revealing flashlight, like a blacklight flashlight. So I'm like, it's too easy not to do something with that. If you give any kind of hint.
Okay.
Someone will be posting that in
People
about
can be meeting
72
up
hours.
groups of 6, 7, just
No, I'm a sucker for Easter eggs, and I love it when studios be like, oh, we've had many studios be like, oh yeah, people have found nothing.
And you said that you've been in video games now longer than the other parts of your career.
Film, yeah.
How long is that now? How long would you say you've been working in games?
I mean, it's been since almost 11 years now, 11, 12 years. Or not in games, sorry. Total in games has been about 9 years now.
Wow.
So
and
a little bit in film, mostly in games.
And how was Walkabout your first VR one as well, or were you already in?
It was
VR?
not. I was starting to dabble with VR over the course of the years. Like if the first thing I did in VR was actually like a 360 film back when Samsung Gear VR was starting to take off. We were trying to figure out like I was at Real Effects in Dallas at the time. We were trying to figure out how can we like tell a story in VR and use it like film. And we were like coming up with like all these theories because nobody had really done it before. And we're running into a lot of like interesting problems that then people were starting to solve with the way of like, oh, how do you guide the player? Like, because people could look anywhere they want. It's different than when you have like a static 2D screen of like, hey, look at this, when they could just look wherever they want. So like we have situations where, well, what if they get stuck looking over there? Now we have to like bring them back over here where we want them to look. But no, I also worked on a Quest VR game called Wilson's Heart. It was early on when Oculus was just starting to get started, and that was kind of an interesting one too, where we're realizing that when you're in VR, you can see anything and everything from every direction. Like, so you really have to kind of almost think of it differently than film, where film, you can cheat to camera. You can just, it's only a 2D image at the end of the day you're rendering. But when you're in the physical space, you can't cheat. And that's even something that we have to go by now in Walkabout, because we allow players to fly, which is insane for a game. When you're trying to like optimize it, you're like, okay, you let the player just go anywhere you want. So like oftentimes we will spend a lot of time finding like little like gaps in the geo or like little holes or things that like will break that experience. And we fix a lot of those that the end player never really ever sees. But it basically tries to ensure that we can kind of keep that, believability that you're actually in this physical space, because you can go and look at anything and everywhere.
Wilson's Heart, what raises my eyebrows about that, I love the studio behind it, Twisted Pixel Studios. They put out Path of the Warrior and then were purchased by Meta a couple years later.
Yep.
Haven't heard anything about them since, and I'm just dying to know that they are making a Path of the Warrior 2. That's just what that's what I want so badly. But yeah, that's another great Austin-based studio. So how did this lead to you at Mighty Coconut?
Yeah, so like I said, my wife was also an animator, and we worked together at quite a few other studios. And we were kind of at a fork of the road, because I had just gotten I was part of a layoff at Real Effects, and she was also laid off prior to that. So we were like, okay, what do we do? Like we're in Dallas, we're looking for work. We could go pivot anywhere. Like at one point, I was even talking to Weta out in New Zealand, and it was like that was like a big pivot, but we heard about this studio in Austin looking for people called Mighty Coconut. We're like, okay. So we went down to Austin. We drove down there for like a mixer that they did, like a hiring, mixer, just to get to know people and do like a lot of interviews all at once. And we met Lucas and Christina, and everyone at Mighty Coconut at that point seemed to be really cool. And we took the job and took a contract basically to work on some. It was a VR, or sorry, not VR, sorry. It was a YouTube series called Kings of Atlantis for YouTube Red at the time. They were trying to get more content. So yeah, we moved down to Austin and took it as an opportunity to kind of make a move. And then we've been in Austin ever since. So there's a big gaming community here in Austin that's been able to keep both of us employed, and been here ever since. So it's just kind of funny that like I worked with Lucas back then at what they would call like Mighty Coconut 1.0, and then since I'd left, and then now gone all the way back around, and now I'm back with Lucas again at Mighty Coconut, I guess 2.0 this time on Walkabout. So yeah, I've definitely had a great relationship with Lucas, and always kept in contact. Did like freelance projects here and there of like, a commercial or something they're working on. So it's been fun.
No, I know Mighty Coconut is chocked full of like mercenaries in their field. Everybody is just damn good at what they do. Edward, Don, I mean, Jesus, former Imagineers, amusement
even
park
down to
people,
the licensing
Hollywood people.
with Michelle Martell.
Michelle Martell with the licensing genius. It's like,
David Wyatt crushing it.
Communications.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's this
Community
whole team is
managers
just,
over there.
everybody that comes to the table is coming in hot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still dabble in animation?
Yeah, actually, so that's kind of where I started, is that they were going to do the Labyrinth course, and that was the first course that I worked on, and they needed help with all the animation. So I just came in freelance, and I was like, all right, just I did a good chunk of the animation in there. Henning did the other, a few of the other characters as well, but I did a lot of the characters in Labyrinth. And then that conversation turned into, well, why don't we just bring you on full time, because we have all these other skills as well. So I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do that. So yeah, I'll try to animate as much as I can. But honestly, there's so many other things that need to get done that it's hard to find the time. Like right now we have Nate doing most all the animation that's going in. I know we had an extra animator that hopped on for Wallace and Gromit, but yeah, it's mostly been Nate for the most part. I want to say the last time I put in some animation might have been the pigeons in Upside Down, maybe. Yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, I'll try to get animation in there once in a while if I have the time.
I'm convinced Henning isn't a real person. I've heard him referenced on every interview we've ever done.
That's the dead employee
of Walkabout Mini Golf. I've never seen a picture. I've never heard a last name.
No,
I just hear Henning. I always hear Henning come up. I didn't see him when I visited him, the office. Didn't see him at Connect.
Yeah,
not a real dude. Doesn't exist.
He's actually up in Oregon.
Yes, Henning is like a mascot of the artwork.
Mm-hmm. But he was actually one of the OG. I would even say like there's not Mighty Coconut 1.0, but before that there's like Mighty Coconut 0.0. If we're talking binary, like this is where they were on the trip to Belize to make a film together. Henning was a part of that, so he was OOG.
Wow. Double O.
Wow.
Double OG.
Double OH.
Is your wife still working in the same company with you or no?
Right now, she's off still because we got some pretty young kids that she's taking care of.
Congratulations.
So,
Congratulations on that.
She's happy to be a mom right now, but
no, we got courses coming out.
Well, I mean, before that, like we'd actually worked at Rooster Teeth at one point together. I think that's where she was working before she stopped to take care of her kiddos. So, yeah, we've worked together quite a bit, both around town and throughout. Okay.
No, I thought we had a technical issue, but I pressed a button on my mixer. First ever time I've ever done that. My coffee mug hit it. I thought you cut out, but yeah, that was me hitting this button, and now it muted everything. All right. Sorry about that.
You're good. But no, it's cool. I can't be happier to be married to another creative that at least can understand what I'm talking about, because I know some creatives that will they'll come home and try to explain it to their spouses or significant others, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like it just goes over my head. But at least I can have a little bit of middle ground there. Now she doesn't know how to program, so there is a bit of a gap, but still, for the most part, she understands what I'm talking about.
Well, I can respect that, because even what we do, I know when I go home, I can name somebody that doesn't want to hear all about it. Is tired of hearing about it. Not a second more, not a second, Too funny.
Well, that's actually why I do the Cybertruck podcast, because so then she doesn't have to hear anything about all the nerdy stuff that I talk about EVs.
I often joke if we didn't start this podcast about VR, both me and him would be single, because significant others would be sick of us talking about
Father,
VR.
son, roommates at that point.
Yeah. We had wanted to start a podcast about something for a while, and then the amount we were talking about VR, it was like, nah, it's kind of obvious this is
became a problem.
The topic to go with for sure. So
what a time! The VR, the whole industry has really kind of created a phenomenon now that I think we were all hoping for. The fact that we have mobile VR now, and it's actually viable, and now we have a whole base of players. Now we can actually make these products that even just 5 years ago was still kind of a wish.
Well, without studios like Mighty Coconut making experiences like Walkabout Mini Golf, we don't have anything to talk about.
We got nothing.
It's very
and the timing was perfect, but that was somewhat deliberate too. Not wanting to do something that's just this oversaturated. We have to have a passion for it, and I loved the idea of growing with something versus trying to stick yourself in it.
Yeah.
So it's perfect. But you're right. I'm not a sky is falling guy with VR, so I see the growth and where it's heading, and I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps it fun for me, is that the way I see it is that we're just continuing to make the players happy and give them enjoyment of what we're doing. So that's really all what we're trying to do. Which is, it's totally funny to see people will wish for things. You're like, oh, what if we had this course or that course? And then on the back of our minds, we already that's already in the plan. They'll get there.
We fell victim of that during an interview, and it could have been Lucas. One of the times we were talking about courses, and it became evident to me that I'm best to not wish for shit, and just because I think we were big on the Star Wars thing too. Like that, it'd be great if you do a Star Wars course, but then
I haven't let that go. I'm just
licensing is always really difficult too. Which
what Disney? They're tough to license with,
right?
Yeah. Luckily, you got Michelle Martell. I got faith. No, I'm just
give him some time.
I don't even put it in the universe anymore. I'm just more amazed with, I'll try to mentally guess, all right, what are they going to do next? Because they just did this, and then boom, I'm like,
was not
see
expecting
that coming. I never
Olympus.
Predicted at all what I think the next course could be.
No, not unless they announce in advance. The next course is going to be
then even then I'd probably get it,
But yeah, no. So take us through a little bit of your workflow. If so much of it is optimized, and let's look at a course like Mount Olympus at the scale of it in some aspects with the mountains, and huge. It's also a beautiful course. You just get handed these.
Here you go.
This thing, and it's like
here's what we did.
2 frame rates a second, completely unoptimized.
It's crashing the system,
and now it's your job to kind of get it working. Or what does that whole process look like?
I'm just going to laugh at the other coworkers I know that are probably going to be watching this and then laughing at that comment. But yeah. Sometimes it happens like that. Sometimes it's where we try to see the wave coming before it crashes. But also keep it in mind, like we're trying to put out as much content as possible. So we almost have like a regimented amount of time that we're trying to fit this into. And because I'm kind of more at the tail end, it's like I'll get something like, hardened, ready to go out the door, and then roll right into another one that's already just like hot and heavy and in the works. So Olympus was one of those that where we knew it was going to be an issue, and we knew that there was a lot of triangles in there. But we also knew that we kind of had a plan to make it work. But even then, like we had to bend our own rules to try to like make it work. And what my job is trying to give the artists and the designers like the best possible chance to have their idea like out there. Like at the end of the day, like sometimes I do have to try to like say no to certain things, like, we just can't get this to work. They're like, oh, we tried it, but it just doesn't work on the Quest. But we try like our best to, champion all the other artists as much as possible to make it work and make it sing. And not alone, like add our own touch of art to it as well. Like, something I actually looking at it in the editor right now just to spark some conversation. But there was like quite a few things that we added that were new to like the Walkabout universe that for an effect wise we hadn't done before, that sparked a lot of great conversations internally of like, how do we stick to, that Walkabout visual style? Like one, you'll notice the rolling clouds that you're standing in when you're in God mode. Like all of that was brand new. And there was a lot of discussion of like, okay, what feels like Walkabout, or as well, there was like molten iron. That's another new effect that we talked a lot about, like trying to make it feel like it's in this universe. And we have those discussions anytime there's like a new effect. But that's always fun for us because we're like, we haven't done XYZ before. Like let's play with it and see what it would look like in this world. But like certain things that we've done before, we're like, all right, water or ocean, that kind of stuff is already in the game. So we're like, okay, we know what it should look like and we can fit in that mold. But those new things are really fun.
We always tout the fact that every course brings some new dynamic to the Walkabout universe here, whether it's some gameplay element, could be some artistic element, but there's always something new.
Yeah.
So I mean, as a whole, again, just like we gave a lot of credit to Chris, it's like for this whole team to be able to pump out new concepts almost from scratch in the sense of like conception, because you just don't want to cookie cutter what you've done, and knowing you have to make sure that you're not subconsciously just cookie cuttering something that's already been done.
Yeah.
Pretty freaking impressive.
So are you just hearing the development team in the process before it gets handed to you? A million triangles? What are you doing?
1.3.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think to them, I think they're like, all right, just put it in. Just put it in. We'll see if it can fit. But I mean, because they're like, I know the exact limits of like what the hardware can do, like specifically what we're trying to give it. So yeah, when you see those numbers, the hard numbers, it's hard to like avoid the actual like facts of like this is the number we need to hit, and it's a lot less than half of 1.2 to give you an idea to fit on the Quest. So we have to get, really, really creative of like how we just optimize it. And we actually built, shout out to the whole team really, but shout out to Jeff for building a new kind of culling system that's different than what we have been doing in the past, because we were starting to run into even limits on mobile as well. We're like, okay, mobile, we have to keep memory in mind as well. So like the overall like size on disk can be an issue on mobile. We need to just like get it just to squeeze just enough so that it would work. And that was one of the things that helped out. But it gives us a new system that we can even hopefully make even better, more grandiose courses like this. Because this one, the scale is the biggest hurdle. Like we knew it was going to be an issue from the beginning, but we also were trying to anticipate as much as we could.
So
I thought Labyrinth was pretty damn big from a course standing.
Oh,
that one was huge.
We should try to drop Labyrinth in Mount Olympus and show the difference.
Show the difference?
Yeah,
really?
That'd be cool.
Have you ever seen those like online trends where they use a banana for scale for everything? Like Labyrinth, the Labyrinth for scale. Labyrinth is the scale of everything. Labyrinth for scale.
Yeah, or Welcome Island for scale would be the good one. So try to.
So did I understand this correct? That like when you get handed everything, it has, example, 1 million triangles or anything, and then you have to reduce that down to a number that will run on the Quest?
Yeah, and so like I said, we initially had 1.3, and we actually were able to cut that down to 1.2. So that's just basically just deleting. But outside of just deleting, what we could do is create LODs. So you probably hear about LODs in games, which stands for level of detail, where like, you see a building up close and you see all the detail. Maybe it's like, 10,000 triangles of this building, but when you see it from really, really far away, we actually LOD that down quite a few times so that far away it's only like 1,000. So like that difference of like 10,000 for 1,000 is how you get 1.2 million tries down to half that for the Quest.
And that's more of a Quest 2 limitation, or does it carry over to Quest 3 with the same rules?
Actually, I did see the limit for Quest 3 doing this course, so there is a limit on Quest 3 as well. So it's not
okay.
Like, until we see new quests. We definitely have seen the limit of what it can do. So, which is it's cool, but it's also just funny at the same time. Of like, okay, well,
we've already maxed this one out.
We do have to be careful. But the other thing to keep in mind is like, now when I say the total of the course is 1.2 million, it's all of it together. And like very rarely you actually see the entire course in its entirety unless you like fly straight up and look back, which we do optimize for, by the way. So like, I don't want anyone to like feel any kind of nausea. So like, if you're looking at it from a distance, we try to at least make sure the game doesn't break. But when you're like standing in God mode, for instance, there's other things called like frustum culling. So anything that's in your camera view is all the geometry that's actually going to be rendered. So when you're thinking about 1.2, but you're looking in this direction, you may only see like 300,000 out of that 1.2, depending on what you're looking at.
So really, the more I'm kind of seeing like more straight line point of view, the more detail you can put in there because you're not using a full, right? Am I crazy? Okay.
If you're like, for instance, God mode in this course was actually thought of in that sense as well, because usually God mode is like where we back away and you see the whole course, but the course was designed almost like a half ring or a donut, so that you're not looking at the entire course. You have to actually turn around and look around. So that was one of those things where like we kind of anticipated it before we, tried it.
You hear the name Mount Olympus, you already kind of know.
Pretty genius.
It's going to be
that's pretty genius.
Yeah.
I love how you guys are finding workarounds on this, though.
Yeah.
To squeeze in more.
Try to push it as much as possible.
The conquest against triangles.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Edward who had to educate us into the triangles, too. He's talking triangles like I'm born with that.
Yeah, and I had to be like, wait, slow down.
Calm down. A triangle? What are we talking about?
Well, Edward hears it because he's up obviously at the beginning of the pipeline, and I'm here down at the bottom like, hey, I'm usually like yelling up the chain. You're like, hey, maybe be careful on that one. Yeah, because if it was like, say, if the entire course was below that threshold of what you can see on screen on time, yeah, it's easy. It's really easy to make it perform. A lot of VR games just do that, where they're just like, all right, we just won't put that much detail into it and just make it run. But we're literally trying to push the bounds and push the limits as much as possible and make it run all at the same time. So it makes it a lot of fun and a lot more challenging.
Curiosity, I'm thinking of Wallace and Gromit, but each one of those rooms, you're not really seeing the whole thing at any point but there is still a lot of detail going on in each and every one of those rooms.
And a lot of characters too. You'll notice that there's not very many characters in Mount Olympus. There's some vultures that are up on a tree and some that are flying around, but that's also done on purpose. So like more characters we have, the more of our render budget goes to actually animating those characters. So we have to keep that in mind. So Wallace and Gromit overall try count was actually fairly low because we knew we were going to have a lot more characters. And for instance, it's on purpose that you don't see, you'll see Wallace and maybe Gromit together, but you'll never really see more than that. Like you'll never see a lot of like, mainly because both Wallace and Gromit had blend shapes in their rigs to make it look true to the show. And those are more expensive to do. So we had to be kind of mindful of where they were placed, just so that you wouldn't see a lot of them all at once.
And did I hear you correctly at the start that you do a lot of the lighting on the courses as well too?
I don't do the lighting, but I try to clean up as much of it because lighting is also done by Tony Davidson. Shout out, because he's amazing. He also goes back to film. He's worked at DreamWorks and all these other places, so he has a great eye, and he's the one that's been lighting most all these courses ever since I've been on board.
Top tier people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing else you can say. Show me a slacker in the bunch. It's a role model studio.
Mean and lean. I mean, like we're 30 we're over 30 now, like almost 35. But yeah, it's
no, it's pound for pound one of the best studios. Y'all are giving people across the world some of the best experiences.
I say it all the time. For $3.99, when you get a new course, you get 36 holes because you have the easy and the hard mode, which that's actually another challenge for you. I didn't even think about that. You have to do 2 whole freaking courses because they are different. There's like totally whole different things look different in them. Oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that. So 36 holes. Then you have 18 new balls to get, and then you have at the bare minimum 1 new putter to get with a fox hunt. So it's like you get so much content. Do you remember when they went up in price $1 or whatever it was? And like, there was all these like Mighty Coconut apology socials coming out the wazoo. It's
like
$1 more.
Like we're hosing the customers, so apologetic to like
buy a latte for more than $1.
And if I remember correctly, the feedback from the community was basically like, you can charge us more. You know, we'll prepay. It doesn't matter. But that just shows to the humbleness of the studio as a whole.
Yeah. We just try to delight and surprise. That's all it. And that's, I think, the key to the magic is like we keep doing that and keep fulfilling that dream. I think, you know, the community will respect it and keep us going too.
Well, it's a very positive community too, very helping community, positive, and you all have a formula that works. It's like, you know, seems pretty basic. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But it's not. It's working. It's been working, and I don't see that going south anytime.
We keep pushing it though. Like I think earlier when Chris was talking, there was something you guys mentioned about letting go of good ideas. Like there was actually a lot of ideas in Mount Olympus that didn't make the cut. Because I think this kind of area is one of those that is easy to come up with cool ideas. Like, you know, the Greek mythology. There's so many cool things you could do. There's so many mystical things you could do. Which we kind of like touched on that, but there's so many things that we didn't get to do because it's so grandiose of a course to begin with that it just like, all right, at the end of the day, we only have so much time to get it out the door. So we're like, all right, we got to cut something. It was kind of like 8-bit layer because it was the 80s. There were so many things you could do. Like it was just like a free for all. And the only reason that I think we were able to get that one done is because we had really good concepts of like what that, you know, digital VR universe was going to look like. Cause otherwise it would have been like, who knows? Like we could have just played for days of just like coming up with cool stuff, but at least we had like a goal and a vision. Like, all right, this is what it needs to look like. And we're like, all right, cool. Execute.
I'd love to see a chopping block course of just, you know,
all the cut, like the island of
ideas
misfit.
We wanted, but the technology wouldn't let it.
The island of misfit holes,
right? The Isle of Dr. Moreau.
Oh, that gives me an idea, but yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, no, there's so many. I mean, it's funny that as a consumer, it's like we would take Walkabout scraps and people would find the joy in it. There'd be no downside to it.
Such a good game. Like you said, brings so much joy.
Dude, the stories are endless.
Yeah. The fun is on our side too. Like I said, I started hiding some of the little stuff just as like, all right, let's see if people catch on. And then like a year later, there's like Reddit posts. They're just like following along. Like, this is where you can find all the mini skulls. I'm like, yay. Like they caught it. Like that's fun.
A community following behind one of your little toy creations. That's awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So
we just have fun with it. And plus you probably noticed all the underground stuff and under the shack, like all of that stuff is super fun. But like,
yeah. And I find myself continuing to go down there and I'm just looking in all the windows down the hall, thinking like I'm going to see something there. I like don't trust that I'm not going to see something sometime that's not here today, but could be here tomorrow. I don't know.
Needless to say, not to mention that it's every course, like as Chris said too, every course is completely different. Like you never know. Each one has its own challenge, both in, you know, art or performance or who knows, but it kind of makes it fun and fresh because it's never going to be the same. So, and like I've worked on other games in other studios, and it's like we're not doing it like other games are made. Like we're definitely doing it the hardest possible way you can think of, and we're putting out content faster than you probably would. Like if you, I don't know, just to throw out an example, like if you could compare like Fortnite is like a behemoth of a game, and they're coming out with content like every other week, but they also like outsource all the extra content that they're coming out with. Like, so they have like teams and upon teams to like make all this for it. We just got, 30 plus people to to make it happen. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's worth it because we get to make really cool art and experiences that nobody else is making. So
when I love the unpredictability of it, but then again, the predictability of it. It's like there's things I know are given. A, it's going to be fun. A, it's going to look good, but there's going to be some new element. There's going to be new surprises. It's like it's a genius formula.
Yeah.
Don't know if it would work for everyone, but it's definitely working for the coconuts.
Yeah. And I do know you reference, you have a newborn. It's a Sunday. The listeners of the show know we record on Sundays. So we're doing the most selfish thing. We're taking a new father, stealing him on a Sunday for almost an hour now. So we're definitely appreciative of your time. We'll wrap it up now. I just wanted to say huge fan of all of your work, everything you do
it.
Over at Mighty Coconut. Every person there is such a huge piece of the puzzle, especially optimizing and getting things to actually
it won't work very well without that.
Yeah, like I said, you can have the biggest vision you want,
from
but
the sounds of it, it would crash really bad.
It means nothing if it doesn't run. So
it would not work on the Quest 1, that's for sure. The Quest 2 is our new baseline.
So thank you for taking the time to chat with us. Chase, before we'll wrap it up, is there anything you wanted to?
No, I have a feeling we'll have to have Chase on again down the road.
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, pumping out courses.
Fellow podcaster. I think he can handle the mic. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
I could do this.
There's a lot of the mic adjustment. It's like a musician holding the earphone, No,
Comes with the job.
No, I think it's great to just get a little peek behind the scenes and what it takes to make one of these courses.
How to get a million
flawlessly work
run.
for the consumer. Yeah. And really pushing the envelope of, people may not realize it, but literally pushing the envelope of what you can put into it. So
yeah, we're not taking the easy route, that's for sure, and it pays off. Because players enjoy it, and we enjoy making the challenge happen and making it work. So
yeah, we enjoy it.
Awesome. So Mount Olympus, another hole-in-one course from Walkabout Mini Golf. Chase, thank you for joining us today. To the listeners, if you're a fan of Mighty Coconut, Walkabout Mini Golf, this one, like I said, another hole-in-one. Go grab Mount Olympus. Like I said, great.
Learn something.
Visually good, as we got to talk here with Chris as well too. The audio on it, damn good as well too. It's a fun one, so check that out. Also, if you enjoy the show, as always, subscribe, rate us 5 stars on whatever podcast platform you listen on. That's YouTube. Smash that like button, all that stuff, and we will check you out next week. Ciao, ciao.